Like,
All right. Welcome, everybody. Steve Katie here with John. Hey, John.
Good to be here, Steve. Really good to
Lots of,
be here.
yeah. Lots of good friends that I have known for years that are here and new friends that I think are some of your friends that are here. And
Great conversation to be in this circle. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
really, really nice. Yeah. So how are you today?
You asking me personally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in Seattle. I'm looking out at the Olympic Mountains and the water. I have a lovely apartment on the sixth floor, great view, small town. I'm in West Seattle. I lived in Poland, for the last 16 years, so I didn't have a car. So when I came back to Seattle, they said, don't go back to downtown. And so I'm here and I can walk to the swimming pool where I work out, the bank, the restaurants, hardware store, everything I need is within a 5 or 10 minute walk. So I'm just happy as I can be. And
What's your favorite?
it's great to be in this circle with you guys.
Yeah. 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 So I was going to say, what is your favorite thing to do in that little hub there? Do you have like your little favorite thing to do?
Well, yeah, I've got a couple of favorite restaurants. I've been here 1 year now. I've been back. I miss Poland like crazy. My inner circle, and you all know what I mean by that. My inner circle is back there. The people that I processed my life with, I shared my life with, they're all back there. I'm single, and I'm here. So my persona is Yoda. They gave me a new persona back there in our leadership program, and they said, I said he lives in a cave by himself, walks with a cane, waiting for Jedi Knights to come in. And I went, oh my God, you just described my life. I don't walk with a cane. I don't walk with a cane, but I had a little hitch in my get along for a while in my left hip. So I'm in between the worlds, Steve. Actually, I'm
Yeah.
still trying to find myself here and see who's in my inner circle now. So I'm a
Yeah.
little bit homesick. I feel loved by
Um,
many people, but lonely. If that makes any
gotcha.
sense.
And for you, when did you fall in love with this international work? Was there a moment or was there a
That's a great question because I don't want. I'm 83, so I have a long story, right? But I was in the Lutheran ministry, followed my 5 generations, and I'm John Jacob Scherer the fourth, right? And after the Navy, I was a combat officer during our little Vietnam thing for 4 years on a destroyer. And after that, I went to seminary. I said I got to get this out of my system. And I was the chaplain at Cornell University for 4 years in Ithaca. And at that point, I kind of was discovered by Bob Crosby, and he invited me to come and be the co-founder of the LEOS program, the first competency-based master's program in applied behavioral science, 1973, 74. So from the very beginning, there were people from Canada in that program. So I was in a sort of, Canadians, they're almost like, fellow, they would never want to be fellow Americans, but so that was from the beginning. And right from the beginning, I had invitations to go to different places, like to the Bahamas with a widely multicultural organization there, Mexico, a couple of gigs in Mexico, mostly in this side of the ocean. And then I got an invitation to go to South Africa to deliver a keynote, and that opened up that Africa and then the UK. So probably within 4 or 5 years of me getting into this field, I was doing a little bit, and I would pretend that I was international by having some of these one or two. I had only one or two clients. You know how when you're trying to look like you're bigger than you are, and so
Mhm.
that's what I did. But I have been kind of international for quite a while.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so for today's talk, tell us a little bit about what you're going to share with us.
Well, okay, I've got a few slides. You tell me when would be
Yeah, whenever you're ready, whenever you're ready.
okay. Can I share the screen? Who is it,
Yep.
Leo or somebody? Okay, good. Great. Let me see if you can see the slide. Can you see the slide?
Mm-hmm. You can
Okay.
expand it if you want.
Yeah, I'm just
There you
I'm
go.
working,
There you
I'm
go.
working on it.
Yeah.
Hey, okay. So this was the first slide when I had the opportunity to deliver the first module in what we think is the first PhD program in OD in China about 12 years ago. And this was my first slide. I said, action research, it was a module on action research. Like many principles of OD, was developed and tested by a small number of mostly North American and British middle-aged white men right after World War II. Okay, let's just get that out. Secondly, as a change consultant for 50 years, working in a wide variety of industries and so on, even though the principles have served me and my clients well, those principles do not apply in all cultures or situations. So in our course this weekend, will you help me figure out which parts of what has worked for me and my organizations and other might be adaptable in yours, and what will need to be changed? Thank you. And boy, they told me later that the room just relaxed at that point. They told me at the break, because they thought, Mike, here comes another American going to tell us how we should do everything. And so I think one of the things that I would hold out to anybody doing any work in a non straight white, college educated North American or British context, no, a lot of the stuff that we take for granted just isn't working. It won't work. So here we go. First thing, some years ago, I had a chance to go take some business people into the Maasai world, and I traded my wristwatch and my binoculars and a couple things to this warrior. And we were helping them build a building for a school there. But we were really there to learn from the Maasai. The excuse was to go there. We had about a dozen people from the business world. We're going to come and help you build a school. But the real reason that we all were there was to learn from this culture. What do they know about leadership and change and community? Fascinating. That would be a whole nother thing. So I traded this guy, my wristwatch and everything, for a spear and a shield. And so I went to my friend Kakuta, who was one of the young elders, one of the warriors, said, so brother, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing okay. He said, no, what's wrong? And I said, well, I gave my wristwatch, to Kabole, and now I can't tell what time it is. And he said, well, here, take this. And I said, he handed me this. And I said, what's this? He said, this is a Maasai wristwatch. And I said, well, how does it work? I'm an Eagle Scout, so I figure you put a toothpick, do something with the sun. And he said, oh, look, he said, it's time to be doing exactly what we're doing right now. And that just blew me away, because I realized there's two kinds of time. In the biblical tradition, there's kairos. I mean, there's chronos, which is clock time, which I would say is management, very important. But then there's chronos. I mean, then there's kairos, which is what does this moment need from me? And that's leadership. What is it time for now? And so a fundamental lesson that I learned from the Maasai people, or had reinforced, was this distinction between what is it time for now? What an extraordinary leadership question. So that's one. Here's another one. I'm just going to give you a couple of little insights that I've had in some of this work. And this is how China, I was doing this action research thing, and here, the guy in the middle, he smoked like a house on fire. Anyway, he was the head of education for the Communist Party in that region of China. Okay. And so he came up to me after this thing, and he said, John, thank you for coming to our country and so on. And he said, please go back and tell, it was when Obama was, he said, go back and tell President Obama, he thought I had a, first name basis with Obama. But he said, tell them that we're using the clock as a metaphor for change here. That inside of a clock, some parts never move or change. They're fixed reference points, which are absolutely necessary for the other parts that do move to know, how they should move. And he said, we're trying to figure out which parts need to stay still while everything else changes. What a fabulous metaphor. I mean, it's true everywhere. But he said, please tell the people in America, this was like 15 years ago before all the, hit the fan. But it's like, tell people back there that we're trying to figure out what parts need to stay the same and what parts need to change. So that's another one. And then there they are. That's the group. That's the group. And I'm telling you, talk about elders, how different cultures treat elders. I couldn't open a door. I would take a sip of tea or water and it would be filled. I mean, they treated me like I've never been treated before, frankly. It was an extraordinary amount of respect and everything, but this is the first group. And then this is really interesting. This is the OD Eastern version of change, and this is how we see it in the West. And you all know this. I'm just putting it up here. You can take a screenshot or something if you want it. But some of our colleagues in ODN and NTL have done a lot of thinking about this. But there's an approach to OD that is very linear. It's planned. It's sequential. You can put it on PowerPoint slides. And this is the way the big four consulting firms typically approach OD. I have this model of above and below the waterline, and so they operate above the waterline, which is where roles interact. Below the waterline is where the people interact, and sometimes they don't pay enough attention down there. I think that's why most M&As fail, is that all the effort went into the A, the acquisition, and not enough went into the M, which is the merger. And I had the chance. Have any of you seen Witcher? If you understand Witcher, this is a series on TV, but it's also a game. Well, the executive team that created that game is about 5 or 6, kind of like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who was Polish, by the way. They're just some cool guys 15, 20 years ago creating this video game, and it became the best-selling, I don't know what you call it, but video online thing in the history. And then they, of course, they made tons of money. Now they, instead of having 15 or 20 creative people, they've got over 100 and some people in an organization. And now they have to be managers of other creative people that were like them in the garage. And that's a whole different skill set. So I was brought in with one of my colleagues to help them figure out how do we change the mental attitude of us in the executive leadership team. How do we, instead of micromanaging these people, because it's what we were really good at, how do we let go? It's fabulous. This is a woman. I hope this is interesting to you, because every one of these is worth an hour. This is an amazing woman. She and her husband lived in Iraq, and he was a publisher of a newspaper, of a media empire that was, of course, trying to promote democracy. So she and her kids went to school with bodyguards in an armored car, all this kind of stuff. And at one point after the war, basically the Taliban put them on a list of enemies. And she was being interviewed by a Polish radio guy looking for interesting stories after the war. And he started talking to her. And he said, "Let me see what I can do to help you." She said, I want to take the kids and my husband and get out of here. So he knew somebody at the Polish embassy in Baghdad. And so he created this path, top secret path. And he said, after some while, "Look, be ready to go, have all your bags packed. I may call you in the middle of the night. Be ready to go in 5 minutes." So about a month or two later, she gets this phone call in the middle of the night, and they have so they rush out, they get in the car, and they had this whole James Bourne type strategy, but they got to the airport and the Taliban were waiting for them with AK-47s. And they were threatening to shoot her husband. She said they had a gun to his head. "You can't leave." And a bunch of citizens at the airport came around and basically made it, with all their cameras and everything, made it impossible. And they got on the plane and flew to Poland, for Pete's sake. And I met her in Warsaw. She was in a leadership seminar. Amazing story. Anyway, we don't have any idea sometimes about these kind of things. And this is an OE team. Every time I do an OD project, I create, like many of you, an internal team of people who actually carry out a lot of the work. And this was the team for this phone company, one of the first ones that I did when I went to Poland. It was called Natia. And these are actual slides from the merger project. We had them put their history following the future search process of honoring the past, acknowledging the present, co-creating the future, from Marv and Sandra. And so this was one of the slides. And then the CEO and I became really good friends, and they were merging 3 companies. And this one was between 2 of them. And he said, this one exercise with the polarity, he said, "This is what made our merger work, John." So we had the Tele2 was this smaller company being gobbled up by Netia, which was the company that he ran. And as soon as we had these 4 quadrants out on the floor in mixed groups, so the top 150 people from both companies were blend. And for the first day, they had name tags with their company's logo on it. And the second day, everybody had the same, you know, it was a lot of symbolism there. But he said this is what made the difference. And these were the two cultures. One was really kind of hierarchical, and the other was more family oriented. And then how do we get to there? And then this is the last thing I want to do with you. This is an actual, this is me and my colleague Przemek Gawronski, who's a 7th degree black belt in Aikido, by the way. Really, I taught about 20 people to do OD over the years, and so this is us leading an affinity. This is the processing of an affinity diagram with an internal OE team. So I think it's about a minute or two long. Let me play it for you.
Is going to end up in the top 10. Would you predict that? Yes. I mean, just on what's happening here, I would say
Are you able to hear? Okay.
it's probably going to be in the top 10. Now look, here's what happens next. Here's what's going to happen next. Some kind of a cross-functional team is going to be brought together. You're going to suggest what kind of people should be on the team, HR, but all these people. And that team is going to study the issue and come back with some kind of a recommendation, just like all the other 9. Okay, so I recommend letting the process go forward. Trust the process, and then see what comes out. So that it will make, I would say just go ahead and take them into the top 10. Don't you?
Tak. I ważne jest, żebyśmy mieli tę świadomość i żebyśmy komunikowali świadomie.
Right. So if I understand you right.
So I could understand a little bit of what she said, but not enough to be accurate. So Przemek is sitting there doing virtually simultaneous translation, whispering in my ear, because some of it was in Polish and some was in English.
A promise
Tak.
of more money was kind of made to the organization.
Not kind, it was
It was
made.
definitely made.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it was announced by
Money's,
the
you're gonna get some raises, at least that was the
Yeah.
thing. And then the budget was not increased, and therefore the
Yeah.
raises didn't happen, and people are now blaming the managers like
Yeah,
you.
asking me,
Saying,
where
why didn't
where
we get the
money?
money? Why didn't we get the money? So let's do this. Let's go,
The budget was increased.
so, well, okay.
And
Right.
jeżeli w jakimś obszarze był podwyższony, tak, to wtedy komunikujmy to w tym obszarze, a nie w całej organizacji.
So let's do this. Let's go ahead and just prioritize without even worrying about any of this. If salary, okay, you want to translate that?
No.
Okay, dobrze.
Jak powiedzieć, jeśli mogę. Jedną rzecz, bo jednak tak jak patrzyłam na wszystkie wyniki wszystkich zespołów, na tą całą naszą wielką tabelę z 70 kilkoma wierszami, to jednak kwestia wynagrodzeń.
She's talking about how they don't have any hope that anything will change.
To nie chodzi o to, żeby podwyższyć w całej firmie na wszystkich stanowiskach tak samo, bo to też nic nie da. Tylko się zastanowić, jaki powinien być system benefitów tam, gdzie grady są niższe. Bo to tam się pojawiają czasy pod gruszą.
And he's translating for me in real time now.
Co to powinna być taka kryteria, że
That's it.
Jubileusz w postaci 500 zł to jest śmiech. To naprawdę...
So hang on. This is obviously really, really a hot, hang on, please, let me.
Jako pracownik, bo ja nawet naprawdę blisko nawet tych podwyżek nie leżę, nie? Żeby była sprawa jasna, tylko mi się wydaje, że nawet jakbyśmy wprowadzili te podwyżki, to za 3 miesiące jakby
Nie chodzi o
She's just not letting go.
I'm gonna cut.
okay.
Anyway, that's it. That's it, folks, for those slides. I hope that was interesting or useful to you. So that's just my way of getting us started here.
Yeah. So what I'd like to do.
I'm
Yeah,
interested, Stephen, anybody's thoughts.
Yeah. Let's do something
Action.
fun here. Let's do something fun here. If y'all could open up the chat, and in the chat, and don't hit enter. Just answer the 2 questions before you enter. So I'll tell you when to hit enter, and just in the chat, write down what was your reaction, and to what's been shared so far, what you were watching, and what's been shared so far. What's your reaction, and what's a question that's coming up for you, bubbling up for you, and just let's type that in. Let's take a minute to do that. We'll all hit enter, and but wait to do that. It's called chatter fall technique. To shout out to Keith McCandless from Liberating Structures on that. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Okay, 1, 2, 3, bink, hit enter.
Oh,
And
that's
so-
very cool, Steve.
yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, and so Teo, thank you for being here, and Lisa. Lisa's our producer, so thank you, Lisa, for all your work and helping us put today together. And Teo is here from Nexus and my co-editor on the Collaborative Change Handbook, and I'm partner in conspirator in Nexus. So I appreciate that. Why don't you all take a look, you all? What we can do here is just take a second to read through that. What kind of themes are you seeing pop up? We're a small, intimate enough group that you can unmute and pop in and just say what themes you're seeing, what your reactions are to what you're reading, or bring a question in, however you wish to engage with John. But let's just open it up for a little bit of discussioning and conversation with John. And whoever wants to start, just unmute and pop in.
Great questions.
So I want to respond to Bruce's comments, the woman who was passionately resisting. And he said the door was open because her fear in that exchange represented her passion about this. And it just reminded me, you know, in Gestalt, we talk about energy is energy. So if you can convert that energy into what you're trying to do, which I hope you were able to move in that direction, it's fabulous.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the whole thing talks to me about the spaciousness and openness it takes to work across cultures. It's just, you know, I don't know if when we met, you were in Poland and I was in Belgium, but it just reminds me of what it takes when there are 7, 8 passports in the room.
Yeah, how to not make her wrong in that moment because it
Yes.
was interrupting an OD process. No, that is the OD process from my point of view. Whatever anybody has to say, how do we convert that energy? How do we Aikido? I practice some Aikido. How do we blend that energy with the flow of the macro intention of the intervention? Yeah. Yeah, thanks for noticing that, Francis. Następny, that's Polish for who's next.
As I was reading through the comments, I was really struck by this, you know, not being a native English speaker myself. I think Anthony is put in the chat here, communicating cross-linguistically and cross-culturally is exhausting. So much is lost in translation. How do we account for that? I think about that a lot, even when I talk to my little brother who is doing this work in German. So all of his frameworks and concepts, his education was in German, mine is in English. And so our conversations are really weird because they bounce back and forth. I still speak enough German, he speaks enough English. But sometimes we do like, wait a minute, what are you talking about, Teo? That makes no sense. And so for my little brother, that is sort of like, yeah, I'll tell the older brother but where he's off. But sometimes it is that lost in translation piece. I was wondering, John, if you do have, is that something that tracks for you specifically to let me pause here,
Absolutely. I didn't realize, you know, how people don't realize the air quality in like LA or something. So they have a weekend, you know, in Colorado or something like that. I didn't realize how tiring and exhausting it was to be doing my work in a culture where I wasn't fluent with. So I'm carry on a very basic conversation until I came back to Seattle, and I'm talking to people in the hardware store. I can actually go up and say, you know, hey, what about this? What about this? And on the street, hello. It was just like, it was almost, I felt like somebody on the spectrum, just overwhelmed by all the input that was coming into me now. Because when I was there, I created this bubble around this bell jar, and I learned how to be in a restaurant and not know what anybody else is doing. So it is exhausting. It was exhausting, but I didn't realize it was. In the military, I had 4 years on a destroyer, right? Like I said, combat officer on a destroyer, and there's no tired is not a word. I'm sorry, Captain. No, thank you. I'm too tired, you know, so I'm not gonna do this. And somewhere I learned to just keep, you know, just next, you know, chop wood, carry water, chop wood, carry water, do the next thing, and the next thing, the next thing. And I didn't realize how really tiring it was. And then the other part of the question is what gets lost in translation. I mean, I don't even know for sure, but I know in some cases for sure that, for instance, in that exchange where the woman was concerned about management making a promise, I mean, that's a standard thing anybody's done OD has to deal with disappointments based on a real thing happening in the real world. And then the emotions attached to that and all the projection, and I'm an old Gestalt therapist, right, Francis? And so all the projections that go on to management about that. And so how do you deal? So some of the stuff is exactly the same everywhere in all Singapore, Asia, Africa, Europe, everywhere. The same meta issues occur in organizations. The question is, what process do we use in order to do the Aikido to feed the concerns into the process?
Hey, John, I have a different question.
No, seriously, I would never have guessed that, Jervis.
I want to check if you have the same impression I do, and especially after being back in the US for a year, is that it seems like OD as a concept is ascendant in most of the world, while in the US it's almost disappeared.
Absolutely true. I never
Yeah.
called, let me just pause for that. I never used the word OD consultant for myself ever. I just helped clients solve problems until I went to Eastern Europe. And
Right.
over there, OD was kind of a sexy, hot thing. It almost like the developmental curve, you know, it was in startup mode. And
Right.
so, you know, and leadership, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, I wonder if that's because we don't call ourselves OD anymore, fearing that that's going to create a barrier.
Yeah. And then who owns it? Does HR own it? Is it an executive function?
Oh, that too. Yeah, that's all.
You know, I mean, there's all kinds of debates. Meanwhile, the organizations are suffering and we're trying to help them and don't know how.
Yeah. Well, and if you follow the newsletters from like McKinsey or places like that, they're all talking OD, and they're reinventing it.
Change management. Yeah.
Change management.
Yeah. Kurt Levin and all of your people are turning over in their graves, and anybody that's not in a grave that understands how OD works no, they don't get it.
Yeah. But coaching.
It should be job security for us. The fact that the big four don't get it. And in fact, in that merger that we did, there were 3 companies being merged. For some reason, the regulators let this company buy 2 smaller telcos at the same time. And it was like it was front page news. I couldn't read the paper, so I never knew what was going on. But apparently, it was a really big deal. And BCG was hired. I kept briefing the CEO years before he put his management group through my 4-day leadership program, and I was giving him stuff about M&As and why they failed and stuff like that, because they were buying these smaller waka 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 like Pac-Man, and then they bought this one that was fairly large, and he said, "John, I think we need you for this one." And that was when, you know, and so that was the whole. That's where OD showed up for me. It was like my second year over there. Otherwise, I was just doing training programs. Like you said, coaching, leadership were categories that they already had. But system thinking and how to help a system shift, like all, you know, the culture change stuff, never heard of it. It was like how to change freedom. I told people, I'm here to help you learn how to convert freedom into effectiveness. That was my kind of tagline for the first few years. Because the wall came down in 89, and I was there in 2007, so it wasn't that far, you know.
What do you think we need to do in the US to reinvigorate the field?
I've given up, Jervis. I mean, it's you and I have always had great conversations about the difference between action research and what you got, you know, the dialogic and diagnostic. And I don't see that big a difference because I learned it from, you know, Ron Lippert, who learned it from, so I'm one handshake away from Lewin, you know. But this, we're always, how many angels, feels like seminary, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Who freaking cares? Who cares? You know? Who
Well, I
cares?
tell you why I care, because, you know, there's 70 years of embedded wisdom in this field, and, you know, the
And
textbooks that
why
carry
can't we
it.
sell it? Why can't we sell it?
Mm. I wonder if we even try.
Yeah, I don't think we've been trying. I think um because that's not we aren't marketers, right? We may use concepts in marketing for communication, for different things like that, but selling isn't our strong point. My other observation is that I always feel like OD is kind of like coaching. You can't really coach someone who isn't looking to evolve.
Yeah.
And the executive set is very controlled, like the kinds of people that are in, especially in the US, that are in the executive set seem much more management and control oriented than evolution oriented.
That's really, really interesting comments. I wanted to touch on that and offer a couple thoughts. And Jervis, you and I remember us standing outside that little circle in Baltimore, and I was telling you what I was thinking about, which led to us getting ODR, ODJ, I mean, OD practitioner changed to ODR so it'd be more open. But I have more to come on that topic. And I just want to share with you one small thing that gives you some hope. And at the same time, let's see if we can pull some more questions out to really pull us back into the international piece. But I just want to leave you with one thing here. Listening to a lot of the people out there practicing that are doing directly OD work, OD&C work in the United States and around the world as well. But really listening to them and designing of our doctoral program to meet their needs. If you go to the website for our doctoral program, you'll see a description there that sort of tries to get at the heart of what people care about, and particularly in the United States. And this is a doctorate for people, and the average age is 47 years old, with 20 years of experience. And it's a doctorate. It's a D.ODC. Gotcha. Okay, mind you. Now, let me tell you, we are in our 6th cohort. As we sit here today, we're starting in late August, September. We have 20 people in the program that are paying 150% surcharge, i.e. they pay tuition plus 150% as an executive program. We have 25 applications in process, and we have another 50, 60 people inquiring about the program. Now, we asked them why are they pulled to the program? They say, I've been looking. And when I finally land on the program and read the description that you see on the website, when I read the description of what this is about, I go, this is where I need to be. This is what, and they have a passion for it. So I do think, Jacqueline, what your point is, and that's, Jervis, you and I talked about, a Got Milk campaign. We need to get marketing, we need to get business savvy and build the field. That's a whole nother area, and I'll stop so we can get back to John and maybe some questions here. John, go ahead.
Let me just say one thing I want to say to you, Jervis. From over in Europe, I've been watching you and Bob. I am totally supportive of it, even though I want to have active conversations with you about perceived differences, because I'm not fighting for anything from the past. I just want to help my clients. And you and what you and Bob it has breathed some life back into the real world OD conversation. I just want to give you as much juice as I can. Sorry, Steve. I just want to correct anything. I was replaying the tape in my mind.
Yeah,
I don't
good.
try to think I'm not
That's
totally
all good. That's all good. And Jervis, and Jervis, you and I have a lot to talk about this, because I want to circle back, because I got stuff we're doing at the Academy this year around that. So hope is there.
I don't think we have to make action research wrong in order to do
No.
the next thing.
No.
But if I'm telling you where I am, I'm ready to sacrifice all those labels if we can. I don't care who wins. If there's any kind of a debate, I don't care. I want the clients to get help.
Yes, right on. Well, it's good stuff, and I know we all care about that. So let's move back in the direction of looking at what the questions were here. Any other questions that popped up or anything that you all want to bring in to ask John and jump into?
I'm interested, Steve, in any reactions people had to that actual affinity diagram. That was an action. You know, when people say, "What is OD? What is OD?" I say, "Well, you want to know what OD looks like? Here's what OD is. Here's a snapshot of OD." And people go, "Really? That's OD?" I go, "Yeah, that's pretty much. It's having conversations about a series of conversations about
Yeah.
improvements."
Any reactions to the video?
Well, I had a reaction to the video, but also to this last few minutes of conversation. And I'm going to start with a phrase or a comment that maybe there isn't one OD. You know, when I look
Right,
at what
right.
now ATD has picked up an organization development function, organization design forum, change management has been mentioned, and maybe we who come out of the Lewinian tradition don't have the only one right way to be marketed. And I'm getting more and more interested in, I'm calling it inter-OD or interdisciplinary, where we find the common ground among whatever groups we're working with and say, yeah, there's some validity in a number of different pieces. What can we build on here? A little bit like what you were saying, John, about what does the client want? Of course, I do want to add the old OD question. Who is the client? Is it the person that's paying me, or is it the macro system surrounding them? But I think
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, the Polish illustration for me said I was experiencing some common ground human dynamics there, and I labeled it from my own, frameworks of the past. But I think they are common dynamics. And even though I couldn't understand the Polish language, I think I was understanding the dynamics there. And if we can share that, I think we have a chance, as long as we don't just try to sell OD as we think it is.
You know, when I went there, if I can maybe make a segue from what you said, and Steve, to bring it back to what we were saying before, years ago, a client said, "John, you have the gift of giving us what we need disguised as what we're asking for." And I think OD needs to have that fundamental skill. How do we give the clients what they need? So nobody ever calls up and says, "I'd like a system-wide high engagement performance improvement." That's what I call OD, system-wide high engagement performance improvement. They always say, "Can you do a leadership program for my top 20 field?" Whatever. So how do and I have this presentation I do, how to turn a request for training into an intervention with system-wide impact. Right. And I mean, it's just a couple things you can do to get that team. What other units do, step back and look at it as a system. What are you responsible for delivering to the system? Who gives you a grade on that? Who gives you inputs? So, and get representatives from their system in the room for the training for that team. Now we're doing OD on a very small scale. And so it's not like you have to do a culture change initiative for 10,000 people. If you can get that team to step back and start looking at themselves as a part of a system, from my point of view, that's worth doing.
And I agree. That's my bias too. That's the frame that I want to impose on them, sell them, whatever. But that's my bias. A lot of the people that I work with, if they understand that, sometimes they agree, sometimes they say, "But no, right now we have a problem. We need to solve that, or we need to improve market share, or something else." They may have different priorities, but I'll admit that's mine. That's my bias, and you just said it well, John. I think if I can sell that and impose it and trick them into it, the world will be better. That's my bias.
Well, I get asked, and this is true in Asia. It's true. It was true in Africa. It's also true somewhat in America, but it's on steroids in Eastern Europe and to some extent in the UK. There's a hierarchical top-down, that the wisdom, the higher up you go, the smarter you get. And so the decision-making is done from top down. And of course, OD wants to, work in both directions. And in Poland, I saw it so clearly. I would get a call from someone at the C level quite often someone who was a C-level executive, sometimes HR was reporting to that person, but quite often it was be an executive from operations say, John, I heard your talk. We need to change. Can you help us? So, and can you come and do a leadership program for our management board? Yeah, I can do that. That's a cash cow for me. But talk to me about what's going on in the organization that you're hoping this will be, will address. And of course, then that opens up the whole thing. This leadership program for this 10 or 12 people, that would be really helpful. But when that's over, there's still going to be stuff going on in the system that wasn't even touched by this. And the people at the bottom, the Gen Xers, they're going, change, yeah, come on, bring it on. What the heck's taking you guys so long? It's the middle. This is true, the power stuff going on here. It's the people in the middle that are the guardians of the old way of doing things. The top and the bottom are ready for change. The ones, and this is a classic thing we all know. But in Eastern Europe, that is really, really true. We have to get the middle of the organization on board. So it's not just that a few people are resistant, the system itself, because of years under the Nazis waiting to be told what to do, and then years under the communists being told what to do, you just do not ever initiate. Entrepreneurs are starting to happen now. That curve is starting to happen in Eastern Europe. But boy, I don't know, Theo, if you would agree with that, but people wait around to be told what to do in order to not make a mistake. That's true everywhere. But boy, in Eastern Europe and in Asia, that is the name of the game.
You have people with decades of lived experience that the safe thing to do was to follow orders. I'm going to say it that drastically. That live in a world now that feels like the rug is getting pulled out from under their feet every 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And they're yearning, many of them, to go back to a structure that they knew and understood. And that includes myself, who grew up as a pastor's son, who was intentionally by my parents, by my family, kept outside of many of those being told sort of structures, where sometimes it's like, boy, that was so much easier. Like if you had met me as an 11-year-old, I knew what my life was going to be. And then the Berlin Wall fell, and now I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And that is very true for many folks in Eastern Europe.
Are you familiar, John, with some of the neuroscience behind what we're finding recently about what Theo just described? Are any of you familiar with the neuroscience connection? Where are you?
A little bit, but I'm always interested in more.
Are you all? Would you like to hear a little bit about? I can just give you just a little bit on that.
Absolutely.
So there's in the
This
brain.
is your Steve. This is your webinar. You're the
no, it's ours. It's
gorilla.
ours.
You can sleep wherever you want to sleep, man.
Well, it's our webinar podcast. I'd like to make sure we all have this together. So the brain, as it develops, and you go through a major development phase, all the way through 26, 27. But as you get into the teens, a lot of the brain is growing. And particularly, there's two sections of the brain. One is an area of the brain that really drives what's called crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is the type of intelligence that where you follow rules, it's routine, simple problems, simple solutions, and those kinds of things. Very, very dependent on structure and those kinds of things. And that's sort of the middle back part of the brain. The front part of the brain, which is, the executive function area, the prefrontal cortex area of the brain, it develops as well as you get into your teens and really develops throughout your life. But really in that teen area is where the big development. And the reason is because you're going so much hormones are going through as they go through puberty, and it really kind of creates a neuroplasticity to create that development. Now, what happens is the prefrontal cortex, when put into routine rows and aisles, which is called the factory model of education, or the industrialized education model, which was used in the 1800s and 1900s and to today. And the intention of industrialized education is to create docile, compliant workers that follow rules and don't complain when they're in a factory doing rote work. Now, here's the thing. Recent research is showing that type of pattern, it worked, and it works so well that people feel a lot of discomfort when they get into creative, higher order thinking, empathy, collaboration, cooperation, all of these things that we do in OD. So what happens is people fight to go back to what they're comfortable with. Here's the flip side of it too. The research is showing that when people are in those environments through their teens, but also in work environments for 15, 20 years, they're showing that the prefrontal cortex gets underutilized. It actually shrinks, that area of the brain shrinks.
Wow.
And you have people later in life, a lot of people that are in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, you have a 60% likelihood of cognitive decline and a 33% more likelihood of dementia as you get older. And there's practical research done in organizations showing this is actually happening.
That's scary-
And
that's
I
scary,
got
isn't it?
yeah, and I got a paper I'm writing on it. It's a revise and resubmit. I'm getting it done. I'll be glad to share it with you all. I'm going to get finished up this week, but it goes through and kind of gives just it's a simple primer overview of this, what this connection is.
Love to see it.
That's what I think is happening.
Love to see it. And hey, at 83, right? I'm wishing I was 53, but that still puts me in the zone of what you're talking about. So
Yeah, but if you're working on complex, hard to figure out, focused problems, critical issues, human dynamics, dancing with all of that, you're going to see a lot more brain health.
well, mam nadzieja. I hope so. That's Polish for I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jervis, you were warming up there, man. It looked like you came back on the screen. Is something you wanted to say there? Okay. I'm an old Gestalt guy, right, Francis? I notice everything.
No, I was wandering around doing things, getting people
Yep.
ready to do so. But now I can sit.
I'm interested in whatever's going on in your hearts and minds here.
Well, since this was, advertised as listening to John talk about OD in the rest of the world, I'd like to hear John talk about OD in the rest of the world. Like,
Yes, me too.
and what
Well-
you're noticing.
Okay.
And on that
Okay.
note, just a part of my question, John, as you talk about it, was just, what are some distinct examples from those cultures that you've been in that, maybe were polar opposite in how you had to approach it?
Okay, let me start with the last 15 or 16 years. Even though I was based in Krakow and then Warsaw, I did some projects in the UK, in Scotland, and some of the surrounding, areas. And I've had people from 55 countries now graduate from my 4-day leadership, even Uzbekistan, for Pete's sake. And so I'm in touch with what principles seem to cross all the cultures. And this thing that I do, the leadership program called the LDI, Leadership Development 10, is based on this is my book, The 5 Questions That Change Everything. And apparently these 5 questions, which we work on in the singular in the leadership program, also provide a really great logical framework for OD when taken in the plural. So the first question at the singular is, what's confronting me? What tigers am I facing? In the plural, what's confronting us? What tigers are we facing? That's the first question. And as soon as a group, no matter what culture they're in, acknowledges that there's something going on that we can't fix with our defaults, with what we normally do. See, I'm a Gestalt guy. Pattern interrupt. Okay. We need a pattern interrupt here of some kind. So what is something that we don't know what to do with? So right away, they're opening themselves to fresh thinking, or at least initially within certain limits. Can you help us with this? The second question is, what are we bringing to that encounter? If we turn and face that tiger, we use metaphor of facing the tiger. If I were to face my tiger, or we were to face that tiger, what would we be bringing in terms of our hopes, our fears, our what's the conversation we're having about what's our history with this kind of situation? Question 3 is, what's been running me personally, or in the plural, what's been running us? Like as we look at this situation that we don't know what to do with, what are our defaults that we're not aware of? And that's where we do the persona and the shadow and all the stuff internally that I brought from my Gestalt training. And when you do that in the plural, it opens up all kinds of really interesting stuff. What do we say? Go to Ardrich's stuff about what do we say we do? What do we really do? What do people think we do? And so on. And then question 4 is, once we discover the default patterns that we're in, our operating system, and how it's trying to help us, but not now, we need to fiddle with the operating system. What calls us from 2 directions? What gifts do I have in the singular? In the plural, what are we really good at? What are natural gifts that we have in this system that yearn to be, that call out to be expressed in our work together, in our products to serve our customers and clients. What calls out from inside and what calls us from outside? What's the difference in the world? If our whole operation system disappeared tomorrow, what would be the hole left in the world that other people would find themselves going, what are we here for? So it's kind of like the calling question. And then finally, okay, big deal, got all that. What will unleash me personally, or plural, what will unleash us? Those 5 questions have worked across all the cultures that I've ever been in. So instead of going to an OD theory, I go to this more, I don't know what you'd call it, but it's more functional or operational set of questions. And then the concepts from Gestalt and Aikido and OD and, leadership development, all the other things, spiritual development, all the stuff, Peter Vale and I were doing 25 or 30 years ago together. All that stuff then becomes a part of what I bring in, what I bring into the conversation. So an example would be, and this is more typical, I get a call from someone, this is happening with, I think I can say this. Yeah, I think I can talk about this. Anyway, the Witcher group, fascinating people. We got a call to come in and do, and in fact, it was my friend Shemek, the Aikido guy that you saw on the video, and he and I went in and did our 4-day leadership development program with the CEO and his and the management board. And of course, they're facing this thing about now they have many more people. They're now being called on to be managers of teams rather than experts, content experts. So that was the first thing. And before we even went there, we had a conversation with the CEO. Let's say that all of these outcomes occur for the board. What's still going to be happening in the organization that might need attention? So we're already getting the CEO to think about follow-up. And so after 6 months or a year, they've now gotten back to Przemek, because it's all now in Polish, because most of my work was in English, because usually the management boards all spoke English. That was one of the requirements for getting promoted in Eastern Europe. And so now we've been invited back to say, how can we change the culture? And at that point, we do our thing. We create conversations with people, cross-functional groups, cross-functional teams, affinity diagrams, where are the opportunities for growth? And so by simply engaging the organization, high engagement, performance improvement, the system is transformed, not by talking about transformation, but by actually doing some stuff we're breaking patterns by how they identify and they address some of the issues. So I don't know, maybe that's too vague for you, but that's an example of the kind of process that I've done over and over again in my 15 or 16 years back there. How to take a request for change or some training program and how to evolve that into something that has more of a systems impact.
So
Francis had a comment. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I guess, so as you talk about that, John, one of the things I experienced, when you're in a group working with your model, your 5 questions, one of the underlying things that I find operating that makes it complicated, people in that room have a different perception of leadership than you bring from the American business school. So when you're prescribing or suggesting things about leadership, their vision of what that involves is different. For me, I kept wondering where I was going wrong. And I'm in the front of the room and I'm a woman. And people have different perceptions of the role of women in leadership. I didn't put any energy of being Black in Europe. My energy went into being a woman and being American. So all of this complicates your ability to be effective. I mean, you just got to be aware of all these things going on. And by the time, it takes a while.
One of the things, thank you for that, Francis. One of the things that my middle son, David, is a hip hop rapper. He has 8 CDs out. If you Google Agape Sharer, David Agape Sharer, you'll see his website. And he's doing DEI work now, Francis, which I'm so excited about, with an African-American friend he's had for 15 years. Anyway, David has been teaching me, he's been raising my consciousness, because my whiteness, my straightness, my being an American, all that stuff, when I walk in a room, I don't think about that. And my friend here in Seattle, Lou Rochelle, who's an African-American woman like you, probably in the same age bracket as you, extraordinary woman. She and I have been friends for 30 years. She told me one time, she said, John, I never walk in a room without wondering, am I going to find a sister in the room? I don't think walking in the room, I don't think, am I going to find a brother in the room? There's all this unconscious rank that people carry or don't carry that we don't even think about. That has been a consciousness racing thing for me in the past 15 years. Has been really, really helpful. Now, if you got off the plane in Warsaw, Francis, you would affect the demographics of the country. I mean, it is a white Catholic, you know what I'm saying? You would change the statistics of the country. So from that point of view, from a racial point of view, everybody's white. Everybody at least pretends to be Catholic, but so it's a monolithic culture. So back to your question. When the C-level group has a transformative experience, then they experience individually and together the reality of opening up and letting go. We use the funnel concept that up to now you've been trying to solve all your problems because your operating system leads you down this path. And so we want to help you do this and have options outside what's comfortable for you. So when an executive team actually experiences that and sees the power and value of it, and everybody's still safe, everybody still has their job, in fact, things go better, it opens the door then for people below them, because people look up to figure out what's real. The training programs quite often don't make any difference. It's like people look up, and when they see it happening up there, then there's a little more openness and down through the system. I mean, it sounds mechanical, but the drums beat in a system. And when the C-level people start to interact differently with each other, boy, the drums beat and people go, maybe there's something to this. Maybe they're serious this time.
Experience.
Could you speak to a little bit to the diagram where you compared the east-west perspectives?
Sure.
And could you speak a little bit more to that and maybe the implications for
Well, Jervis will need to step in
practice?
here. Yeah, Jervis will need to step in on this one.
I do want to honor that we're 3 minutes past our allotted time, but
oh, okay.
No, I'd send a note out. We're gonna go 10 minutes more, so we're good.
Good. I'm just, me, I'll just go till somebody tells me to stop. So basically, and this is I don't even agree with some of this because I think Lewin would have been happy with some of the stuff on the right-hand side here. But I'll say it this way: the way the Big Four approaches change management. I don't think change can be managed. I think it can be led. It has to be led, but managing change, anything that you can manage with PowerPoint slides is really probably not going to be transformational. But it tends to be linear, going from left to right, from A to B. Its changes is from a less desired. There's something better about the future than about now. So it tends to degrade what's happening now, make it wrong in some way. It's destined, it's future oriented. We're all headed for this. This is and all of I think this is a polarity that needs to be managed rather than a problem to be solved. Rather than say that the left-hand side is wrong, there's the stuff we need to acknowledge here. Disequilibrium driven, like where are things not working? Externally managed, the external consultants tend to have more power in the process. And and the static state is seen as, that homeostasis is the home base. The Eastern approach is that it's cyclical. There's ebbs and flow. It's more polar. It more is able to embrace the polarities present, I would say. Change is a constant cycle. It's not where go boom, 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 boom. But there's to use Barry Johnson's model, it's an in and out, it's inhale, exhale kind of model. It's journey oriented. It's like where are we in the process? What's the reality right now on the way to something? But it's not about that destination. It's focused on equilibrium, that harmony is the natural state of things. It's internally managed. We always get an internal team, always have an internal team that has co-leader, somebody on the board, not the CEO, but somebody trusted by members of the organization and by the CEO, serves as a co-lead for this internal OE team or OD team that we create. And that change is the normal state. That's an oversimplification for me, but I think it's very useful as an OD consultant coming into a system. Where is this client? Where's the culture, first of all? Where do they lean in terms of this way of thinking? And Eastern Europe leans toward the left. Well, I don't think that change model, I don't think that's sufficient. I like a lot of the things that are on the right-hand side. So how can I get a group of people that are waiting to be told what to do to trust a bunch of, you know, people that aren't sitting in the boardroom to come up with interesting, that's been true over here in America too. Every OD project I've ever done has a major chunk on orienting and preparing the decision makers to receive and know what to do with breakthrough ideas coming up from the bottom. I hope this is helpful. I feel like I'm throwing darts in the dark here, but is any of this interesting? You're still here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'm
it's great.
I'm
I
assuming
And it resonates.
Okay, great.
I think I like the point about the polarity and managing it. And I like the idea that we are all co-creators and coming into
Yeah.
it with a co-creation idea.
Yeah. And
I
they don't
love
believe
your
that.
opening.
Exactly.
your-
They don't believe that coming
Yeah,
in.
and I love your opening that you shared. I just left Cleveland Clinic's simulation educators workshop, looking at how they do simulation training. And one of the things they talked about was how when you come in and start a simulation training, which really takes people on this uncertain journey and learning, that you start out by talking about you create the safe container by stating that we're all here to do our best. We are smart and capable, and that we know that of each other, and we're in this together. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I start from a place of humility, I think, authentic humility. I know some things that have worked before, but some of them are not going to work for you. One of my good friends has been my consultant for many years, Ingvar Peterson. He ran Nintendo for 15, 20 years. Anyway, Ingvar says, John, I'm going to give you some advice. He said, but 50% of what I'm going to tell you is wrong. Your job is to figure out which is in the 50%. I just love that. That just makes me relax around Ingvar. You know, okay, bring it on, Ingvar. And I think something like that if coming into a process, but the reason the Big Four is so successful, they say, we know what to do. You don't know what to do. If you did, you wouldn't be calling us. So don't listen to anybody I'm overstating, being dramatic, but you listen to us. We will tell you what to do. You go through this process, and then you will have changed. And they run everybody through the process, and they go, here's our bill. See you later. And I asked the CEO of this phone company that had hired me to do this M&A with them. They hired BCG. We call it changing the chart and changing the heart. And I'd been briefing him about this. You got to do both, Mirek. You got to do both. And your process needs to porpoise among those. So when this big one happened, he said, John, I think we need you here. And so the HR director put my team and the BCG team. They hired BCG to change the chart. And they hired me and my team don't know where that came from, to change the heart. So we shared open space together, which after a while we ate lunch, we had coffee together. And over time, grudgingly over the 2 or 3 months, the BCG team began to see the benefit that we were hearing things from the bottom that were hugely significant for their success, which they had never heard before. Because nobody talks to them. You know, when they go down and do interviews and focus groups, everybody's like, you know. So we were able to touch the true heart of the organization. And so at the end of the process, I found out from our spies inside BCG, who started sending people to our 4-day program, that when they had their debrief after that intervention, they said it was the best one that they'd ever had in the Warsaw office. And grudgingly, they said maybe it had something to do with Scherer and that stuff he was doing. So anyway, no good deed goes unpunished, right? So
yeah. Well, so if you all could, I'd love to have John back. So if we could you enter into the chat just what's a takeaway that you found helpful today, whatever it might be, and what's a question you'd love to be focused on in our next webinar podcast with John. And we can creatively, if you want to join in on it, if you want to be part of it or of one in the future on a topic, you can even say that, hey, I'd love to join in and be a part of be the guest on the show. That would be great as well. So could you all just enter in as you leave? What's a takeaway to help John know what kind of resonated with you? And second, what's a question you'd love to continue the conversation around in the future? And you can also add, hey, I'd be welcome.
I loved the numerous examples of
I'm typing for you, Jervis.
I'm filling in the blanks. I'm hoping you're saying,
Oh,
well,
Jervis was
crafted.
engaging. Jervis was engaging his text type to text thing.
It's like
So-
Monk.
So
Obi-Wan.
and so I go, okay, let me type
Obi-Wan.
this down. So I started becoming your type to text, Jervis.
I just realized I wasn't muted.
Yeah. So go ahead. Go ahead and say
Yeah, let
say
me
it.
just say it.
Say
I
it, and I'll
love
type it. Say it and I'll type it.
I love the sort of poetic language that you develop around these ideas like chart and heart and stuff like that. Like I think it's very powerful and it sticks. It's very sticky. The other thing I was going to say is in terms of future stuff, around the East-West dichotomy, which Bob Marshak has written about.
Yeah, he
And
was one of the first.
yeah, and I think actually that chart might actually come from
I
his
think that's from his OD&C article from like 20 years ago or something.
yeah, or a Jabs article. It's called Confucius Meets OD or something.
Yeah.
He's working right now on his magnum opus on this topic. And he might be an interesting person to invite in, Steve, around that thing about.
Yeah. And
So,
did you
yeah,
say Bob? Did you
East-West.
say Bob is doing this?
Yeah, Bob Marshak. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Ask him to call me. Ask him to call me, Jervis. I'd love to talk with him.
Okay, I will. Yeah.
And John, several folks were asking if you'd be willing to share those slides that you had up. I think particularly that.
Oh, they're top secret, Theo. I can't share.
Got
Yeah,
it.
of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I'll send you a money order and.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah. In fact, I had to take a couple photos out because my team said I had a picture of the management board from the from the team that did it, and they said you can't show their faces. It's like, well, this is a whole new world. So I had to pull a bunch of slides at the last minute, about an hour before we started. Anyway, yeah, happy to have you have the slides. Use them any way you want. If you want me to talk to you about something, call me. I'm sitting here in the bat cave, loving this is my life right now. This is one of the most significant things that's happened to me in the last week is talking with you, being with you guys.
Well, that's awesome. And John, thank you. And what we'll do is we'll just keep the conversation going. And almost every single person here could be a guest on this show. You all are doing such cool work.
Exactly.
I don't know all of you, but I think I know almost every single one of you, pretty much. There might be Bill. I don't think I know you. Do I know you, Bill? No. Yeah. So, but and Cindy, yeah, so it's so nice to meet you. But I love to have these conversations. If you have something you'd be passionate to talk about, let's just do it. Lisa gets it scheduled. We make it happen. Let's keep getting the word out there and having a great conversation. So
it's a humbling thing, Steve. The people that you bring together. I was a magician for many years in college and the Navy and all that. It's like doing magic for other magicians. It's terrifying, but I love it.
Well, we love you. We appreciate you. I do. And I'm really grateful for all my friends that are here. And we'll get back together again. It's every Thursday. We're doing them every Thursday at 11 Eastern. And we do that for the global, kind of hopefully making it as accessible globally as possible. And it's wide open for us to keep having conversations and fun. So please I welcome you joining me as a guest, as well as I'll take your questions here. We'll use them to help set up another topic for John. You'll hear about that and you'll get the slides. And if there's nothing further, anybody have anything before we say bye for now? Nope.
I'd like to sit for coffee with every one of you for a whole morning.
I know. Well, let's just do it virtually as much as possible. So anyway, thank you, everybody. Have a great day and bye for now.
Dozo Bacenia.